Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our 10th virtual open house on the Yonge North Subway Extension and the third public meeting dedicated to the recently released Environmental Project Report, or EPR. My name is Azim Ahmed. I'm the manager for the Yonge North Subway Extension for the Community Engagement Team. And while our previous two EPR virtual open houses, as you may have had the opportunity to attend and participate, provided a general overview of the environmental report for YNSC, on February 17th, and then the tunneled portion of the segment was covered last week. This week's portion will focus on the surface segment of the project. Specifically, we'll be talking about noise, vibration, the natural environment, as well as air quality. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for this evening's event. And as moderator, as always, we will ensure that your questions are heard and answered, and we make sure that we get to as many questions as possible in the time available before the end of our presentation and 8:30 this evening. And just to recap, as many of you may have attended our previous sessions and you've submitted questions, we are getting through those questions and we really appreciate it. And we'll be ongoing with that process for after tonight's event and next week's event as well. And as all your questions have been submitted to Engage, will be also answered in the Zoom room. So we thank you again for your interest in joining us here this evening and for your interest in the Yonge North Subway Extension project. And for challenging us. An important note that the event is being closed to captions, so you can use this feature by enabling it on your video player. To begin, as we do, we'd like to do a land acknowledgement. Metrolinx acknowledges that it operates on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. In fact, we also acknowledge that the Yonge North Subway Extension is occurring on lands covered by the Gunshot Treaty 1788, signed with the Mississaugas, and which is within the Williams Treaties territory. We recognize Treaty 13, 1805, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and we acknowledge the first Fort Albany Nanfan Treaty of 1701 with the Haudenosaunee. Metrolinx is committed to building meaningful relationships with Indigenous peoples and to working towards meaningful reconciliation with the original caretakers of this land. Thank you for joining me in that moment. And now I'm going to quickly go through the format, introduce our panelists, and we can get into the content for this evening. If you have attended any of our previous virtual open houses, you'll now be familiar with these. But in case you have not, or as a general reminder, there is a call-in option for tonight's event. In your registration email, you received a link to join a Zoom meeting. You can also just select Join Zoom on the event page on Engage here. And once you're in the Zoom room, you can raise your hand to ask a question live to our panelists. Please do take a quick scroll through the existing questions before posting yours. If you see one that covers your area of interest, you can vote it up. If you'd like to ask a question but don't feel comfortable speaking, post it in the Zoom room chat and my colleague Ali will share. We'll begin with a short presentation and we'll spend some time answering the top voted submitted questions from the Engage site. From there, we'll head over to the Zoom room where Ali will host and relay some of your live questions. Please note that written questions will be answered based on votes, while call-in questions will be taken on a first-come, first-served basis. We want to get to as many questions as possible, so we'll aim to keep each question and subsequent answer to 3 minutes. And again, we'll answer all questions posted to Engage or in the Zoom chat. Even if we don't get them to tonight, we'll respond as soon as possible and post questions to the site, as we've been doing again for the last couple of open houses. So on behalf of the panel, we look forward to a productive and positive conversation. We do really appreciate the ongoing connections we have with you as a community and the time you've taken out to your evening to attend tonight. We also recognize elected officials that are in attendance. We have Mayor Scarpitti of Markham, Councillor Keith Irish, also Markham Thornhill, who are in attendance. And for any other elected officials, we do welcome and appreciate your interest. Your panel for tonight includes Stephen Collins, who's a program sponsor for YNSC, Mike Savaro, who's a vice president of subway extensions for the Metrolinx Capital Projects Group. We have Kevin Coulter, who's a senior environmental planner, technical advisor. Leona Hollingsworth, director for community engagement, 905. Maria Zinchenko, manager for environmental programs and assessment. Maria Doyle, who's a manager for property acquisitions. Sam Collendron, who's an engineer and a technical advisor. And then in the Zoom room, my colleagues Ali McHugh and Zara Hakimi will be there from the community engagement team taking your questions. So thank you and welcome and welcome again. For any and all others that are here for the first time, we welcome you for your interest. If you've been here before, your continued challenging questions are always welcome. So one last thing before we pass it on to the presentation. We do like to begin every meeting with a safety moment, as safety is the core of everything we do. So for this one, I know we're, date is just turned into March, and it's hard to believe that we're almost at the time for daylight savings time. I believe it in March 13th in 11 days. So some important reminders that we go through twice a year. And even though we're actually gaining daylight in the evenings with any change of our biological clock, there is also an uptick in car accidents in the spring as well as the fall. And not to mention in the mornings, the sunrise will be an hour later as well. So we'll have a little bit more darkness in the beginning of the spring. So please be mindful of safety as you're driving and walking and cycling, and use the next 10 days or so to help get your bodies prepared for this. Does anyone else on the panel have any safety moment they'd like to share? Okay, with that, we'll move the slides forward. And on the first slide, you'll see that where we are in the open house series is number 3 of 4. The first one we covered the overview on February 17th on the overview of the entire project and the environmental project report and the summary of our findings. And then last week on February 23rd, we spoke about the tunnel segment, which included noise and vibration, natural environment, cultural heritage, as well as soil and groundwater. And then today, our third one, we're going to be talking about the surface segment, which will again focus on noise and vibration, as well as natural environment and air quality. And then next week, we're going to have an overview of the summaries and findings and the comments we received from you, the community. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Stephen.
Thanks very much, Azim, and good evening, everyone, and really glad to be here with you tonight, and glad that you've made the time to come and share your questions and comments with Metrolinx on the Environmental Project Report Addendum. So I'm going to start the presentation with just a couple of slides, and then our EPA, or the Environmental Project or Environmental Assessment Team, will sort of take us through the slides. But I always like to start presentations with the compelling reason why sort of all levels of government are sort of supporting the Yonge North Subway Extension project. It is obviously creating the missing link in the transit system between York Region and the City of Toronto and the existing Line 1 TTC subway at Finch. It is going to attract almost 95,000 daily riders. And each of those daily riders on their trip from York Region into downtown Toronto are going to save 22 minutes each way. So a huge amount of travel time savings that are going to go back into these people's lives to put to more enjoyable uses than meeting their daily commuting needs. We are confirmed on 4 stations, being Steeles, Clark, Bridge, and High Tech. And as we've messaged and communicated in the past, we continue to explore stations at Cummer and at Royal Orchard as part of our ongoing discussions with both the MTO, the Ministry of Infrastructure, the City of Toronto, and York Region. So the partnership is advancing for the potential inclusion of those 2 additional stations. Next slide, please. Just a quick recap on our project timeline. We're obviously in the sort of midwinter period here, and we're on the sort of eve of a sort of significant milestone or sort of transition of the project from the planning phase into the sort of procurement and construction phase. The orange color box, or sort of line through the middle of this slide, identifies that we are planning to release our advanced tunnel contract request for qualifications. That is the first step in our journey to retain and sort of bring on a contractor to assist in the design and construction of the project. And that is the first step in our procurement, as I mentioned, which will then follow on with a series of additional steps leading to construction of that tunnel project starting in sort of the late summer of 2023. The other thing I do just want to mention as part of this slide is our environmental project report addendum is what we're obviously here to talk about tonight. As everyone is aware, we have released it for public review. That process is underway right now with the anticipated completion of that towards the late April timeframe. And I know our team is going to get into a little bit of additional detail on the process that we're following there. And I do want to just acknowledge that we're continuing to work through the geotechnical investigations. And as we work through those investigations, we'll be completing them. And it may take a little longer to get those done than sort of the winter 2022 as identified on the slide. But what's important to know is that those investigations are critical for the design and construction of the project. We have all of the information that we need to make all of the decisions that we've made to date, and that investigations that will be completed through the summer of this year will inform the design and construction that will be sort of underway following the procurement of the advanced tunnel contract. And with that, I'll pass it on to my good colleague Maria to take us through the initial slides on the EPR addendum.
Thank you, Stephen. So first, just a recap of what an environmental assessment is, especially for those who were not able to tune in to our first virtual open house or the second one last week. So environmental assessment is a process to identify environmental effects that a proposed project may have on the environment. We complete environmental assessments ahead of construction to identify potential effects and ways we can address them during and after construction. And we document all of this work in an environmental project report or an addendum, as is the case for the Yonge North Subway Extension. We've been working on our addendum for Yonge North Subway Extension for a number of months now, and we're very excited to have it available for public review. Please, I encourage you to review. The addendum is available on our website along with comment submission forms. At the first open house, we presented an overview of the findings for all environmental topics. At the second one, we looked at the tunneled segment of the project, and today we will take a closer look at a handful of topics for the surface segment assessment. Next slide, please. On to the surface segment. It is about 1.5 kilometers long. It consists of surface subway tracks that will extend from the portal structure, which is just south of Langstaff Road East, to the northern limit of the train storage facility, as shown on this map. And we have more detailed maps available in Appendix A of the addendum report. Our addendum looked at all components of the segment, which include surface tracks themselves, bridge station, associated bus facilities, high-tech station, one traction power substation located at the train storage facility and the train storage facility itself. For the next few slides, we'll touch on the bridge station, high-tech station, and the train storage facility. But before we go there, just a couple of notes on the portal location. It's indicated by a yellow square on the map on the right-hand side of the slide. It's next to the existing CN Rail corridor, and this is the spot where the trains will come to surface. Also the location where tunnel boring machines will be launched to tunnel southbound towards Finch. We covered the portal and launch site during last week's meeting, and I encourage those who are interested to look at last week's meeting presentation, and of course the addendum report. Again, both of those are available on our website. Next slide, please. Bridge station. Bridge station is proposed to be located alongside existing CN Rail corridor between Highway 407 and Highway 7. It will be a new transit hub that will open up new travel possibilities in York Region and beyond. The hub will bring convenient transit access to the Richmond Hill Center and Langstaff Gateway development areas, which is expected to reduce traffic congestion as these communities grow. So you can see on the map, the hub will also offer fast and convenient transfers to 5 existing and future regional transit lines. And these include Viva Yonge Street Rapidway, Viva Highway 7 Rapidway, Highway 407 GO, Richmond Hill GO, and the future Highway 407 Transitway. Bridge Station is also one of the main drivers behind the Yonge North Subway Extension business case. It's a very important element in creating the network effect by bringing together multiple transit lines to give riders more options and enable easy transfers. I also want to point out the placement of the station between 2 highways. Locating it here enables transit development on lands that are currently underutilized, which at the same time means that the space the station and the hub would have occupied elsewhere can be used to support other non-transit uses and development. Next slide, please. High Tech Station is the last station along the Yonge North Subway Extension, and it will serve future communities envisioned within the Richmond Hill Center area, putting the subway within walking distance of what we estimate to be 2,300 jobs and 5,500 people, which is more than half of the residents that are expected to live in this designated urban growth area by 2041. The station will be built at surface, like the bridge station. It will be located partially under the bridge along High Tech Road, which spans the CN Rail corridor. Next slide, please. Train storage facility. Train storage facility for the Yonge North Subway Extension is proposed to be built partially alongside and within the existing CN Railway lands. Placing it at the surface is standard practice, and it's critical to keep it at the surface to stay within the $5.6 billion funding envelope for the project. Cities like Vancouver, Chicago, and New York all have ground-level train storage facilities that successfully integrate into surrounding areas and also meet the needs of their respective transit networks. This change brings the proposal in line with TTC's, so our local TTC's 5 subway train storage or maintenance facilities, which are all above ground. The train storage facility for the Yonge North Subway Extension is a critical element to support extension operation. This is where subway trains will be stored, inspected, cleaned overnight, and dispatched into service in the morning. The facility will have capacity for 15 trains. The figure on the right shows the schematic layout of the facility. And it shows that the tracks extending parallel to the CN tracks and several buildings that will form the facility together. In addition to the tracks, which will be used for train storage, the facility will have a transportation facility building, which is shown as a yellow rectangle at the bottom of the map. The yellow polygon shown towards the top of the map near 16th Avenue indicates the proposed rail car and shops facility, traction power substation number 7, and parking area. The transportation facility building towards Bantry Avenue will house operator facilities like washrooms and break rooms. And the rail car and shops facility will provide an area for inspection, train cleaning, and routine activities like fixing damaged upholstery, replacing lights, to make sure that the trains are in good state of repair and ready for service next day. This rail car and shops facility will also come with a small parking lot for staff and the traction power substation number 7 will be located in the same area to supply power to the subway. If you're curious about the conceptual layout that is a bit more detailed than shown on this map, then I encourage you to look at our addendum report. The current facility design meets TTC functional requirements and also reduces the footprint and property requirements by consolidating buildings and siting the tracks and buildings right along or within the existing CN rail lands. Also protects for a future multi-use trail planned by the City of Richmond Hill that will run along the west edge of the rail corridor. And Metrolinx will continue to work with the City of Richmond Hill to accommodate it as part of our detailed design of the facility. Like any other surface infrastructure component, our aim is to make sure that the facility is a seamless fit within the surrounding area, which means that during detailed design, we will be looking at the various strategies like vegetative screening to reduce any visual impacts. We'll also make sure that the facility meets applicable noise and vibration limits, and we'll be implementing a noise barrier and other solutions to keep noise and vibration down. And we'll talk about noise and vibration a little bit more in subsequent slides. Next slide, please. Now switching gears to the addendum findings with respect to the surface segment. At tonight's open house, we will focus on noise and vibration, natural environment, and air quality, which are key areas of environmental management on Metrolinx projects, and we wanted to spend a bit of time discussing these for the surface segment. Next slide, please. Noise and vibration is up first, and for those who were not able to tune in to the last week's virtual open house event, just wanted to outline Metrolinx's general approach to noise and vibration management. We start with the environmental assessment studies, which identify recommended mitigation and monitoring. And environmental assessment studies also outline noise and vibration limits that the project will adhere to. Together, these are binding commitments. Environmental assessment commitments are then included in their project contract documents. Detailed design is developed based on these commitments, and contractors also develop noise and vibration management plans based on these commitments, which Metrolinx then reviews and approves prior to construction start. During construction, noise and vibration levels are monitored to confirm effectiveness of mitigation measures and adjust the approach as required. And that is it for the general overview of our approach. And in the next few slides, we'll cover addendum findings with respect to noise and vibration limits and mitigation measures in more detail. Next slide, please. As we covered at the last open house, subway trains are electric, and the main source of noise and vibration is the interaction between tracks and train wheels. When trains travel at the surface, like along the surface segment of the project, this interaction produces airborne noise, which is sound that travels through the air, as can be seen on the diagram shown on the right. This interaction also produces vibration, which is movement that can be felt. Subway trains can also produce ground-borne noise. This is sound that results from train-induced vibration that travels through the ground and causes building structures to vibrate, which can be heard. While we did look at ground-borne noise for the surface segment, it's much less of a factor here because the surface subway tracks are ballasted, and ballast does not have the potential to generate as much ground-borne noise as the underground tunnel structures, which we covered more extensively at the open house last week. Ballast is made of crushed stone and is essentially what supports rails and ties. Other than trains, another source of noise that we look at for the surface segment are stationary facilities. These are non-mobile facilities like traction power substations, bus facilities, and of course the train storage facility. As we'll cover in subsequent slides, there are criteria or limits for airborne noise and vibration for trains and noise criteria for stationary facilities. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about the noise and vibration criteria for project operations along the surface segment. The noise and vibration criteria for the trains are defined in provincial protocols. For the surface segment, we followed the limits developed by the Ministry of the Environment, which is now known as the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, and the TTC, and the Ministry of the Environment and GO Transit. For groundborne noise, there is no provincial criteria, so those were adopted from the United States Federal Transit Administration. And this is a typical practice that's been used on many recent transit projects across North America, and is a practice that is accepted by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. The non-mobile sources of noise, like the train storage facilities, stations, traction power substations, and bus terminal, were assessed in accordance with the provincial guidelines developed by the Ministry of the Environment. All of these guidelines and noise and vibration limits can be found in our addendum report. Details are in the noise and vibration report, and you can also find summary tables with the limits posted on our Engage website. As per the guidelines, mitigation measures are investigated and implemented if a project is predicted to exceed any of the applicable criteria. Photos on the right show some examples of noise barriers from other projects. Noise barriers like these are there to reduce airborne noise in areas along transit corridors or near transit facilities. Next slide, please. First, I would like to talk about our noise and vibration findings with respect to trains. Revenue train operations for the surface segment are between the tunnel portal, so south of Langstaff Road East, and high-tech station. Beyond high-tech, trains travel to the train storage facility, which is assessed separately, and we will cover it in the next slide. So between the tunnel portal and, sorry, previous slide. Between the tunnel portal and high-tech station, our study predicts 1 to 2 decibels increase, with one of the assessed locations showing no changes. I'd like to stress that our assessment was comprehensive, and this 1 to 2 decibel value reflects all sound sources, including the heavy rail operations along the existing CN tracks. Taken alone, electric subway trains are substantially quieter than the freight trains you may see running along CN tracks, and quieter than the overall existing sound levels without the subway trains. As a result, subway operations do not significantly alter the sound levels along the corridor. And if we were to look at that all-in increase of 1 to 2 decibels, then provincial guidelines would tell us that it is an insignificant increase. In fact, it's the lowest on the increase spectrum and what is considered below noticeable, and it does not require mitigation. When it comes to vibration levels from train operations are expected to meet or be below the applicable limits with the implementation of mitigation measures like ballast mats. If you look at the picture on the right, it shows ballast mat installation. Ballast mats are continuous mats made of synthetic or natural rubber that are installed beneath the ballast bed, so that that bed of crushed rocks that supports the track system. And ballast mats offer vibration isolation and also protect the track components. Ballast mats are a well-known and widely used method of reducing vibration. Lastly, when it comes to the subway stationary facilities, our assessment shows that airborne noise levels will be at or below the applicable criteria for all facilities along the surface segment, which includes the traction power substation 7, ventilation equipment, and the bus terminal. This can be achieved using solutions like silencers on tunnel ventilation fan systems. Silencers, or as they're otherwise called, sound attenuators, are treatments that typically installed next to or on fans. These treatments contain sound-absorbing material that dampens or reduces the noise produced by fans. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to cover the train storage facility. With proven mitigation measures, the train storage facility is expected to meet or be below the applicable noise and vibration limits. Trains generally will move slowly along the tracks within the facility, and there will not be many of them, as the facility's capacity is for 15 trains. We identified an approximately 5.5 meter tall sound absorbing noise barrier that would extend along the west side of the facility from about north of Bantry to about south of 16th Avenue. And we anticipate that this barrier will effectively reduce noise from the train storage facility operations. Our noise and vibration report shows a more detailed conceptual layout of this barrier. We've shown a couple of sample noise barrier types earlier in the presentation. You can find another one at the bottom of the slide. It's only a rendering, and as part of the detailed design for the facility, we will confirm the exact dimensions of the noise barrier, barrier materials, and any finishing treatments. In addition to the tracks, the train storage facility will have special track work, like track crossings, to let trains switch tracks. This special track work can contribute to noise and vibration, and to reduce noise and vibration as trains travel over special track work, we identified solutions like movable point frogs. Frogs are components of track system that help train wheels roll from one track to another. The photo on the right shows a standard frog with gaps between the rails, and train wheels moving over those gaps can generate noise and vibration. The photo on the left shows a movable point frog, which, as the name implies, has movable parts. These parts close the gap between track segments to provide continuous surface for the train wheels, which reduces noise and vibration. At the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that there are no significant differences between what's experienced in the community today and what will be experienced when the extension and the train storage facility are up and running. The proposed mitigation, we just discussed, will get us there. Next slide, please. Moving on to construction noise and vibration. Again, a recap of our approach to managing construction noise and vibration for those who were not able to tune into last week's open house. To reduce nuisance effects of construction noise and vibration, we start our planning before construction. We establish a comprehensive communications program to inform local communities about the scope of work, schedule, noise and vibration management strategies, and of course, communication and complaint resolution approach. The contractors also develop noise and vibration management plans that look at the noise and vibration levels that may be achieved and identify ways to reduce them if we expect any exceedances, and outline monitoring approaches. Last step before construction starts is, of course, to implement all necessary mitigation measures. During construction, we monitor noise and vibration to confirm effectiveness and inform implementation of any extra mitigation measures if any are needed. The photo shown on the slide includes an example of a noise level monitoring station. And usually for a given surface construction area, you may see several of those set up as close as possible to the nearest sensitive uses, like private homes in this case. And it's important to note that we stay in touch with the local communities by way of construction updates and notifications, and respond to any complaints and inquiries throughout construction. Next slide, please. This slide shows just some examples of construction noise and vibration mitigation, and the more detailed list can be found in our noise and vibration report. The picture on the right shows an example of a movable construction noise absorbing barrier that can be reused at multiple sites. This type of barrier has been used quite successfully on Eglinton Crosstown construction. Ultimately, the mitigation measures selected are tailored to each project and each individual construction area. And continuous noise and vibration monitoring lets us confirm how effective mitigation measures are and adjust our mitigation approach as needed to keep noise and vibration down. With this, I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Kevin, who will walk us through the rest of the presentation.
Sure thing, Maria, and thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be spending a few minutes talking about a couple facets of the YNSE project, specifically our approach to natural environment impacts as well as air quality impacts. So I'll start off my remarks by noting that Metrolinx has a strong desire to protect surface water, plant communities, and wildlife for all of its projects. We provide a framework for this protection through the environmental assessment process, as Maria mentioned during her opening remarks. Similar to noise and vibration and other technical specialties as we refer to them, the EA process identifies mitigation measures and monitoring commitments that are indeed binding for Metrolinx and its contractors, which hopefully provides some level of reassurance to the community that we can be a trusted partner to deliver what we say we will do. These commitments are made enforceable through our contractors, through commitments in contract language and through the project agreement. And we actually empower them, the contractors themselves, having boots on the ground, to be a key partner in the development of mitigation measures for the natural environment by helping develop targeted and specific mitigation plans. We often require specific plans for various facets of the environment, including one for natural environment, which will hopefully provide a holistic approach to managing the environmental component of the project. Similar to noise and vibration, all monitoring mitigation measures are regularly monitored during construction, and where changes are necessary, they are made and documented. The intent is to provide a transparent process that really does provide a strong framework for overall environmental management. The image that you see on the right of the slide right now is actually downstream of German Mills Creek in the vicinity of the train storage facility. I'll be talking a bit more about the specific natural environment feature a little later on in my remarks. But this is one example where we have actually developed some rather targeted and specific mitigation measures to reflect this particular ecosystem. If we could go to the next slide, please. Right now, what I'd like to do is summarize some of the key findings from the natural environmental investigation. This is really just intended to be a somewhat high-level summary at this time, and I would encourage people who are interested in these matters to refer to the complete natural environment existing conditions and impact assessment report that is available on the Metrolinx Engage website. As you noted or saw in my last slide, we are looking at potential impacts to German Mills Creek. This is a water course that is within an area that is regulated by the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, which goes by the acronym TRCA. Also within the at-grade segment that we're talking about as part of today's virtual open house, we also have woodlots as well as other features. The image to the right shows some existing vegetation near the proposed bridge station. Other notable features within the study area include a woodlot located to the north of the train storage facility that is part of York Region's woodland system, as well as the Richmond Hill Greenway system. As part of our assessment, we did look at both features through secondary source data that was supplemented and verified through field investigations, and determined that these features, while important to the community and certainly providing value, we have found that they have been heavily disturbed and modified through human activity, which is actually par for the course, typically within the Greater Toronto Area. Within the natural environment investigation, we broken down the aspects that we looked at to include things like natural heritage, but also surface water and fish habitat. In this case, we are not anticipating lasting impacts after applying mitigation measures to aquatic ecosystems. Specifically, we are not anticipating lasting impacts as a result of the German Mills culvert replacement, which I'll be talking about in more detail a little later on. Like with any infrastructure project, there is the potential for impacts to vegetation near the surface. One of our key strategies for actually avoiding environmental impacts, which is always our preference as opposed to mitigating them after the fact, was to make use of the existing CN rail corridor, which does limit the overall exposure and the need to remove vegetation throughout the at-grade segment. Overall, the impacts to vegetation related to our surface infrastructure is expected to be low and would largely be confined to areas where we have things like potential stations, emergency exit buildings, and other ancillary features. When it comes to wildlife and wildlife habitat, which is another facet of the natural environment that we've considered in our investigations, we are anticipating some generalized impacts to wildlife. However, it's nothing that is not routine for a typical infrastructure project. The wildlife that we've identified within the project limits are typical species that you would find in an urban environment and likely would be temporarily disturbed and temporarily displaced to other areas. We have not identified much in the way of significant or specialized wildlife habitat, and it is strongly felt that our existing mitigation measures will provide lasting and sustained protection. Although this project is occurring within an urbanized landscape, that does not mean we don't take our mitigation commitment seriously, and we do apply the principles of environmental protection regardless of where we're working, whether that be in a downtown city or in a undisturbed green belt. The last thing I wanted to note as part of this slide was a quick discussion related to species at risk, which sometimes goes by the acronym SAR. What our investigations have found is that the study area is home to what are known as species at risk generalists. These are species that, while offer protection, are typically found throughout the study area. Notable examples of such species include barn swallow, which is a type of bird species that likes to nest on man-made structures, primarily things like road overpasses and other bridges and structures and things like that. In order to mitigate these effects and make sure we're properly accounting for them, we will be doing additional targeted surveys closer to construction to ensure we're meeting the requirements of the Endangered Species Act. As part of the environmental assessment process, we did do studies. However, it is felt that we need to supplement these activities through additional work closer to construction and closer to the actual anticipated time of disturbance. So we've set a good stage right now, and we're going to be looking to verify those findings and results as part of future project phases. If I could go to the next slide, please. Here is some more specific information related to the German Mills Creek culvert replacement, which I alluded to in my previous remarks. As noted previously, this watercourse and watercourse feature is located in the vicinity of the proposed train storage facility. The image on your upper right shows the existing stream crossing. Right now, the watercourse flows are conveyed by an existing triple cell corrugated steel pipe culvert, which is a very common piece of infrastructure. Because we are developing this area through the train storage facility, and because it is located in a regulated area by the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, one of the things that we're certainly mindful is the potential to add additional fill within a floodplain. In order to mitigate and offset those effects, we are proposing to replace this culvert with an open bottom culvert, as shown in the image below, which actually provides us with a number of benefits. On the one hand, it will increase the hydraulic capacity of the watercourse crossing, meaning more water can travel through the culvert, presenting less of a risk of blockage and less of a flooding risk. And also, interestingly enough, by going from this triple cell pipe to an open bottom culvert with natural substrate, we are actually creating and enhancing some of the existing fish habitat at this location. It's actually a rather nice example of where Metrolinx's development goals and the need for environmental protection measures are actually strongly aligned, in that we are able to not only avoid impacts, but actually provide a slight improvement to what's currently there now. One of the things we looked at this watercourse particularly was the potential presence of species at risk, the SAR I was talking about in that case. What our assessment has found is that this particular reach of German Mills Creek does not provide habitat for any protected species, including red-side dace, which is a fish species that has historically been present within the overall river system, but not within several kilometers of this particular crossing, and the records that actually form that basis for that assessment are actually quite old at this time. So this is one example of a natural area feature that we are heavily looking at and will be the subject of much more detailed inspection and mitigation moving forward. If I could get the next slide, please. What this slide is intended to do is just to provide a very brief summary of some of the mitigation measures that we've identified and that will be applied to construction at the at-grade segment. This is by no means an exhaustive list, and I do encourage people to refer to the reporting on the Metrolinx Engage website and the Environmental Project Report Addendum for much more detailed mitigation. As I noted when talking about the need to make use of the existing CN rail corridor, we do treat avoidance as a much preferred approach to environmental management as opposed to mitigation. That includes minimizing our construction footprints to the extent feasible. When those construction footprints still influence or impact the natural environment, we apply additional mitigation measures. One very specific mitigation measure that you're seeing on the slide is tree protection, which will be applied in cases where we're working in the vicinity of trees. However, we do not propose to remove or damage them in any way. And really what the hoarding you see on your screen is intended to do is to provide a no-go zone for Metrolinx and its contractors to ensure that the anticipated impacts do not extend beyond what was previously considered. For vegetation that must be removed or where avoidance is not possible, the actual vegetation removals themselves will proceed in accordance with the Metrolinx vegetation guideline. And in cases where we have disturbed areas that may extend a somewhat significant time, we'll be providing temporary restoration and stabilization to make sure that those areas retain in a good state and that we are remaining good stewards to the environment. One of the other mitigation measures that will be applied for the natural environment relates to restricting construction during sensitive timing windows. We have timing windows for things like breeding birds, which is typically in the spring. And we also have timing windows for in-water work, like at German Mills Creek, which are intended to avoid sensitive life stages for aquatic ecosystems. Those are just two examples, and we will continue to further look at additional timing windows as part of developing the environmental management plans with the contractors. As noted as part of my species at risk remarks, additional species-specific surveys will be done just to confirm the absence of species at risk habitat, as well as the species themselves, as well as ensuring that we're meeting all requirements under legislation such as the Endangered Species Act, as well as the federal Species at Risk Act. Next slide, please. I'd now like to shift my remarks to a brief overview of how air quality was considered within the environmental assessment for the Yonge North Subway extension. Just like noise and vibration, as well as the natural environment, what the EA study did was identify recommended mitigation monitoring requirements based on an assessment of potential impacts. Just like with natural environment, the mitigation measures contained within the environmental project report addendum are binding and will be carried forward into our contracts and project agreements. Metrolinx will be working with the contractors and will be reviewing the air quality management plans that will provide the contractors site-specific ways to reduce air quality impacts during construction. This would include measures such as minimizing or restricting idling, shifting equipment that has the potential, shifting equipment that has the potential to generate air quality impacts away from sensitive receptors, as well as other measures to provide a more holistic consideration of air quality impacts during the construction process. Just like with all mitigation and monitoring measures that were identified through the environmental assessment, there will be regular monitoring to ensure they are effective in performing as intended. Next slide, please. What this slide is intended to do is to present some key findings from the air quality impact assessment that was done. Apologies for sounding like a broken record, but this is not a complete summary, and we do encourage you to refer to the full report if you are truly interested in these matters or wish to know the details. But if I were to attempt to summarize our remarks or attempt to summarize our findings, I would note that the existing air quality is characteristic of an urbanized area. That means there are certain exceedances of certain air quality parameters at the moment, and those largely those are largely a result of existing transportation uses in the area, things like cars, trains, etc. Because the subways are electric, the YNSE project as a whole is predicted to improve air quality, both by taking cars off the road. Actually, that's the primary reason. As we see a shift away from the use of personal vehicles, we will have an overall reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. For the static components of Metrolinx's infrastructure, things like the train storage facility, for example, its operation is not expected to result in significant air quality impacts. The activities that would be completed in the rails and car shops would be the types of cleaning and daily maintenance that Maria described needed to keep the subway in a good state of repairs. Again, think of cleaning, replacing upholstery, light bulbs, those types of activities. During construction, we will have measures in place both to monitor air quality as well as a program to ensure that we are revising our mitigation measures in any instances where they're falling short. The image that you see on the right of the slide here is an example of an air quality monitor that particularly measures dust and other particulate matters at construction sites. This is one way we verify that mitigation is functioning effectively. You can go to the next slide, please. What this slide talks about here is some of the more specific ways air quality will be managed during the construction process. Just like with other facets of the environment, detailed management plans will be developed and implemented prior to construction. One of the specific air quality impacts that we often find happens as a result of construction is the generation of dust. And in that particular case, one of the most effective ways to reduce those impacts is just through regular watering. Applying water reduces the potential for particulates to be drawn up into the atmosphere, and that's just one example of a very simple, cost-effective measure that can be done to improve air quality during the construction phase. Similarly, any stockpiles will be covered to make sure that the wind does not generate particulates that could impact people's enjoyment of their properties. And similar to noise and things like that, we will be including requirements to limit idling to the minimum amount necessary, as well as making sure that any equipment with the potential to generate air quality impacts is located away from sensitive receptors to the degree possible. Also, where possible, we'll be looking to utilize equipment that has lower emissions and that meet current air quality standards. The Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks does provide general guidance and requirements for construction equipment that will be specified in the contract. Just like with all mitigation measures, we will be consistently monitoring what's happening on our construction sites and making adjustments where necessary. If we could go to the next slide, please. What I'd like to do as part of my remarks right now is just really tie into what the current status of the EPR addendum is at the moment. As Stephen mentioned in his introductory remarks, we are in the middle of a public review period at the moment. This public review period really kicked off with the notice of the EPR addendum on February 10th. Right now, the public review comment is anticipated to close on March 14th. At which time we'll update the environmental project report addendum to reflect the feedback we heard during the public review period. We will also be issuing responses to any comments or feedback that we received, and essentially making a presentation to the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks with the finalized addendum, which will be form the basis for the Minister's decision on moving the project to the next phase. What you'll see at the bottom of the slide here is several links on where you could provide your feedback, and as part of our work, we of course encourage you to do so. All comments that were received during the public comment period will receive a response from the project team, and we look forward to working with you to resolve any issues or concerns you may have. Next slide, please. Just as a final concluding remark, we just wanted to, again, thank you for taking the time to learn more about the project as part of today's discussion. We will now be kind of moving into more of a question and answer period where we will be hearing some of your remarks and hoping providing some answers to any questions you may have. There will be an additional open house occurring on March 10th, and we do encourage you to participate in those discussions as well. Just like in this case, any questions about the project can be submitted through the Ask a Question forum on the Metrolinx Engage website. And you'll see here some additional contact information for how you can get in touch with the project team. Once again, thank you very much for participating today. And with that, I think we've reached the end of my prepared remarks. So I'll take it back to Steve and our moderators at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Maria and Stephen, for the in-depth presentation and overview. We're gonna go over to the engaged questions in a moment, and after that we'll head over to our colleagues in the Zoom room to see if there's any live questions that you may have. So I know there's a few questions out there. The first highest ranked question we have is regarding emergency exit buildings. So we're going to send it to our panel. I believe Mark will take that. And the question for this is, can you please provide a diagram of the emergency exit building and how much land they will require? Has any land been purchased for these buildings yet? And particularly in the Royal Orchard community itself, Baythorn Drive, Thorny Brae. So Mark, if we can talk a little bit about emergency exit buildings, for EEBs as we call them.
Yeah, thanks, Azim, and thanks for the question. So emergency exit buildings are an important element for the safety of the passengers on the subway. In essence, the buildings are the surface elements of a staircase that comes up from the tunnel level and allows access for passengers to exit the tunnels in the event of an evacuation. As well, it also provides access for firefighting crews to get down to track level, again, in the event of an emergency. So the actual at-grade footprint of the emergency exit can be as small as 30 to 50 square meters. However, it really depends on the application, the location, and the surrounding context of where the exit building is going to be placed in terms of what the final design and integration will look like. So for instance, on areas along Yonge Street, we're actively looking to integrate the emergency exit buildings into proposed development and work with the builders in those areas to find ways to make these staircases a seamless part of a larger construction. In the Royal Orchard area, we are still working through some final aspects of our design to determine the exact location for these buildings. So that's why the environmental assessment report doesn't have exact specificity. So what I can say, though, is when we get to that point, we will return and speak with the community about the proposed location and get into some of the specifics of how that building, or really the staircase and the shrouding for the staircase, can be integrated into the community. So that's the emergency exit building story, is it?
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that, Mark. I have another question for you coming your way, Mark. This one is about, sorry, just give me one moment to pull it up. Question is about where exactly the subway will come up above ground. So also how much wider will the overall railway bed be? So if we can talk a little bit about where the subway comes above, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. And Maria covered a bit of this off in her presentation to start the evening off. And the maps are, of course, included in this presentation as well as in the environmental assessment report that's posted on our website. And so the area specifically where the tunnel is ending and the tracks will be surfacing is at the tunnel portal launch shaft area, which is west of the CN tracks, south of Langstaff Road. So from there, the tracks will climb and meet with the CN tracks and run essentially beside the CN tracks to the west of the existing CN corridor. I'd also note at that location, the Langstaff Road, of course, is an at-grade crossing with the CN corridor. So we'll have to do the work to separate the rail from the road because subway tracks cannot be crossed by vehicular traffic. At that point, where the tunnel and the track, the tunnel ends and the track starts to surface, that's really the widest part of the subway corridor, and that's because we're at Bridge Station, and Bridge Station needs space for platforms, as well as space for the piers of Highway 407 to be integrated into that area. So the overall track bed itself, it really varies in terms of where you are on the surface alignment. So it really just depends on what area that we're talking about specifically. And so I think the piece at Bridge, which is approximately 20 meters wide, that's the widest piece. And then it'll narrow from there, depending on what the specific elements are at the surface. If folks are familiar with the section of existing line 1, say between Eglinton south down to Summerhill or Rosedale, that's I think a good indication of what a surface running subway would be. And so you've got, in essence, the distance between two tracks and for safety for the vehicles to travel back and forth, approximately the width of another subway in between that. So I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you. Appreciate that, Mark. We'll do a couple more questions on Engage, and then we'll see, check in with the Zoom room to see if we have any questions there. The next question we have, I believe I'll be passing to you, Steve, is about 16th Avenue and a potential station there. And the question is, I know that a station at 16th Avenue isn't currently planned. However, the tail tracks for the project goes far north as this important road for York Region. Wouldn't it be a quick win to do a simple surface level station at 16th Avenue, which would help enable TOD, transit-oriented development, at the nearby mall and provide more access for local residents? Please consider this. So Steve, if we can talk a little bit about the potential at 16th Avenue.
Yeah, sure, happy to, and thank you for the question. So a few things to just clarify and confirm. So we are running track all the way up to just north of 16th Avenue, as you can see in the EPR addendum. But there's an important distinction between the track that's required for running the trains, which we will call revenue track, and that's the track that basically takes the trains between the stations, and the track within the train storage facility. So when you think about the way we have laid out the design of the project is we have revenue track up to High Tech Station. We have tail tracks north of High Tech Station, which are designed to accommodate sort of the crossover movements during the operation of the subway so that the trains can sort of flow through and go back, if they're coming northbound, they can cross over and go back southbound. So that's really the crossover in the tail track area. North of there is where we have the train storage facility. And we've been working really, really hard to absolutely minimize the footprint of the train storage facility. And the way it's designed is 3 parallel tracks, and each track is going to store up to 5 trains, so a total of 15 trains of total storage. And so when we think about the track that's going up to 16th Avenue, it's not actually designed for revenue track, it's actually designed for storage. And so what we are doing as part of the project is building that train storage facility to accommodate the needs of the Yonge North project that's currently working on. The opportunity that we're continuing to suggest is there and protect for as part of our project, and part of the reason why we see the running the subway at the surface as a great opportunity is the potential for a further northerly extension further northerly extension of the revenue track up to 16th Avenue, and in addition beyond 16th Avenue, including up to Major Mackenzie. And so while it's sort of an idea that is sort of, yes, we're considering it, it's just not part of our current project scope to include as part of, as I said, as part of the current project scope, a station at 16th Avenue, but it is something that we are envisioning in the fullness of time, a further northerly extension of the Yonge subway. I hope that helps to answer the question, and we're thinking along the same lines as you are, that sort of continuing to extend the subway further north into York Region to provide opportunities for people to shift onto that transit service is a great thing to do, and we hope in the fullness of time to see that happen.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you,
appreciate that. Thank you. Appreciate it. Next question we have about tunneling under city property. I think I'm going to pass this to our property colleague, Maria Doyle. The question is, when will residents receive notice if the city property under their house will be tunneled under? For example, Baythorn Drive, it shows the tunnel under the middle of the street, but given the width of the tunnel, it will need to go under city property. So when will the residents be informed, and where can residents get this information? So Maria Doyle, I'll throw this to you.
I'm going to ask you to repeat that, Azim, because I think there's some nuance there that I want to get right.
Sure. So the question for tunneling under city property is, when will residents receive notice if the city property under the house will be tunneled under? For example, on Baythorn Drive, it shows a tunnel under the middle of the street, but given the width of the tunnel, it will need to go under city property. So the question is, when will they be informed, the residents that are impacted, and where can they get information?
So if it's actually about when they're going to be informed when the tunneling construction is going to happen, I'd have to defer to Mark or Stephen on that one.
Yep.
That's not really a property acquisition question.
I'm happy to answer that one, Maria. And you're right, it's more of a construction timing notification question. So from the point in time when we award the contract for the tunneling, It's going to take the contractor at least another year to prepare the launch area and then assemble the machines and get ready for tunneling. And that again is up at that Langstaff Road CN corridor area. So after that, what will happen is the machine will advance at about 10 to 15 meters per day. And what we did on another project, Eglinton Crosstown, is we actually had a TBM tracker on our website, which allowed folks to come and check out the actual progress of the TBMs and see where they are in their drives. I think what would be happening though at that time as well is we'd be issuing a number of communications and posting notices on our website about the construction and specifically the launch shaft construction, and then from there. I think it would be also quite easy for us to be able to inform residents of the approximate timing of when the machines will be passing. But that's still several years out, and I think the commitment we can make here right now is, of course, that we will have ongoing regular communications with the community for them to know when the machines will be passing. And just a reminder, we have 2 tunnels, so we'll have 2 machines. And they'll likely be working in a staggered operation. So one machine will pass, and then a few days later, another machine would pass by. So that's really how that will work. And I think as we get closer to that timing and we have more information from our contractor on the exact time for tunnel launch, and then the progress rate of progression of the machines, we'll be able to give some more specifics as to when it would be coming by people's houses.
Thanks, Mark.
So, Azim, if I can, just to offer up on that. So, as Mark indicated, it's about a year from the time that we sort of award the contract and start construction of the launch shaft until the tunnel boring machine will start working. On our current schedule, on sort of the timeline slide, we're sort of scheduled to award that contract in sort of the summertime of 2023, which means that sort of tunneling operation would begin in sort of the summer time of 2024. Just to set some timelines there for folks.
That's very helpful. Thanks for adding that, Steve. And thank you, Mark, as well. If nothing else to add to that one, I think we're going to throw it to the Zoom room where I believe there's a few hands up. So, Ali, I'll hand it to you. Are you there, Ali? Are you on mute?
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, I can't seem to hear Ali. Give us a moment. In the meantime, perhaps we can do one more engaged question until we can figure out the audio for the Zoom room. Apologize for that. Okay, I'm getting word that we can ask Ali. Are you still there? I don't hear Ali.
Hey, hello.
Oh, still another question from Engage. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Yeah, we're good. Wouldn't be a virtual meeting without any technical concern. Go ahead, Ali.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So we have 3 hands up in the Zoom room. We've got Sam, then Renata, then Roz in that order, and then we have a question from the chat. So I'm going to start with Sam. Sam, I'm going to unmute you now.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me? Hello, 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 hello.
Yep.
Yeah,
Are we good?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. Just I couldn't see myself, so it was pretty difficult to see whether you could hear me or not. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity this evening. But before I proceed, I think it's important that I preface what I'm about to say in a letter that was sent out on April 13th, 2021 by the Catholic cemeteries and funeral services. It states that there are over 90,000 deceased loved ones buried at the cemetery that are respectfully visited regularly by family members, including myself, and friends and other 30,000 living Catholics, including myself, that have prearranged their bereavement services at Holy Cross Cemetery. To tunnel under the cemetery would be disrespectful to the deceased and the families we serve. It would be unfortunate to have to engage the living families of the deceased loved ones buried at Holy Cross Cemetery and those that have made prearrangements. So any suggestion of a subway extension would consider infringing on the boundaries of this sacred and holy place. Where am I going with this? Well, I really think based on the addendum, the 2022 EPR addendum, tunneled and surface segment, it is clearly not going underneath the railway tracks. Rather, it is going adjacent to the railway tracks. And I find that I see that there are over 200 burials adjacent to those tracks. Is Metrolinx planning to tunnel underneath those existing burials? At this time, I'm putting York Region on notice. I'm putting Mayor Scarpitti and the City of Markham councillors on notice. The provincial government, CN Rail, Metrolinx on notice publicly in this presentation. They made it clear that they are opposing proposal of tunneling underneath the burial. And all I've been hearing in the last few presentations that they are going to be tunneling based on your map, which shows clearly we are not tunneling under the CN rail. It is adjacent along the west side of the railway. There are 200 burials there. The Archdiocese of Toronto strongly opposed this. I am putting everybody on notice. I'm going to volunteer on any committee that is being proposed by the Archdiocese of Toronto, and I will be monitoring, as well as a lot of parishioners and Catholics will be closely monitoring this. This letter is April 13th by the Archdiocese of Toronto, strongly opposing any type of infringement on the existing burials, which is considered disrespectful. So I need to know from Metrolinx, are you guaranteeing? I don't want to hear we're in constant consultation. Are you telling us today that we are not tunneling under the existing burials?
Thanks for your question and those comments, Sam. I'm going to send it over to Stephen to start us off from the panel.
Yeah, thank you, and happy to actually provide some clarification, Sam. So thank you for the question, and definitely hear the passion in your comments. So I think the clarification I want to make here, you are rightfully identifying that on the section of the project where we are running the subway at grade will be beside the CN corridor. And that section is from Langstaff Road to the north. From Langstaff Road to the north limit of Holy Cross Cemetery is where the subway transitions from being at grade beside the CN corridor to being below ground under the CN corridor. From the north edge of the Holy Cross Cemetery, well, it's a little further north than that, but it's within the Langstaff Gateway area. We are entirely within the CN corridor, and we run underneath the CN corridor, in between the east half of Holy Cross and the west half of Holy Cross, below the CN lands, underneath the CN tracks until we come to sort of the area near St. Anthony's School, or within the Royal Orchard community, where we shift from being out from underneath the CN corridor to running in an east-westerly direction towards Yonge Street. And so what I'm confirming here tonight is the final alignment, as we've presented quite publicly on a number of occasions. is underground below the Royal Orchard community, travels underneath the CN corridor from south of Holy Cross, underneath the CN corridor to north of Holy Cross, where it then transitions from being below the CN corridor to being beside the CN corridor north of the Holy Cross Cemetery. So that's the project alignment and the project scope. It's a very technical element and area of the project. And so I appreciate that there's some interpretation of the drawings that are included in the EPR addendum that are very difficult, and we're happy to walk you through in more detail if you want to have a more detailed briefing. But the other thing I just want to talk about a little bit is sort of the exhaustive work that Metrolinx did on evaluating alignments. When we started the project, we took a look at every possible combination of alignments to maximize the benefits and the sort of overarching business case for the project. We identified that our station at Bridge is sort of a fundamental element of the business case because we are bringing together all of those rapid transit services at a single hub. And we took a look at the alignments that we could follow to get to that Bridge station. And we didn't, and we looked at every alternative below the community, below the cemetery, and below the Langstaff Gateway area. And on a basis of sort of all of the benefits and effects of the project, the conclusion was that our final alignment, as described in the EPR addendum report, is the recommended and final alignment that we're pursuing the project on. I hope that helps to clarify your concern. And
unfortunately,
if you do have any follow-on questions.
Yeah, you still haven't answered my question. Are you going to tunnel underneath the existing burials along the tracks by that fence? I walk it twice a week.
The answer is no.
But you're looking at a 20-meter track. There's more. It's less than 20 meters to the fence and to the burials. I've measured it myself. I measured it. I go there. I measured it. I measured, sorry, I just don't want to interrupt just because I know I don't have a lot of time and there are a lot of other people asking questions. I went on top of that hill and I measured it. People were looking at me going, what are you doing? I said, there's a burial here. CN Rail it might be allowing a tunneling of Metrolinx to come through here. This is inappropriate. The Archdiocese said it right here in a letter. Absolutely not. We are opposing it. I know there are stakeholders watching this discussion right now, and I'm putting everybody on notice. This will be out there. And nobody has said to me, don't worry, we're not tunneling underneath the existing burials. Yes, you are. You need to admit it. Don't, or else tell me absolutely not. We're not doing it. I'm sorry for my emotion, but I'm okay.
No, absolutely. I'm telling you tonight, we are not tunneling underneath Holy Cross Cemetery property. Our tunnels
are the existing burials. The existing burials. Don't tell me I know the corridor is CN. Underneath the existing burials, there are existing burials right along that fence, 10 feet away from that fence. I know that's the corridor. I measured it and I've spoke to several people at CN Rail. That is a burial. It might be infringing on the CN corridor. I can't definitely determine that. But if you're going underneath the corridor, you're going underneath 200 existing burials at the very minimum. So you need to really look into it. And I would putting everybody on notice as we speak right now.
Sam, if I could clarify, I think the 20-meter number was also in reference to the Bridge station area. So where our tunnels are underground, the tunnels are 5.6 meters wide on the internal diameter. We keep the tunnels 1 diameter apart, so you've got approximately 16 meters to 17 meters of width for the entire tunneled area. And that does fit neatly underneath the CN corridor. So just wanted to re-emphasize.
Are you not going underneath the burials?
Definitely hearing from you the concern, but we are completely under the CN corridor at that point in time.
That's fine.
And under their tracks, in essence. So we're working very carefully with CN about the construction means and methods to ensure that the tracks remain intact, and that there's no settlement as it relates to the tracks. So
again, we're not answering my question. The burials. We're not answering that. The burials are going to be tunneled underneath. You have not made that clear to the Archdiocese. I will be following up, because this, again, we're not answering my question. Are you going to disrupt the burials? Yes or no? I don't care about the corridor. Will you be disrupting it? I have a letter here, April 13th. I'm putting everybody on notice.
So Sam, we'd be happy to sit with you and personally walk you through the details of the track alignment.
Okay, no, I will have that discussion with you guys later on then. Thank you. Sorry about that, but.
Okay, thanks, Sam. We can follow up with you. If you want to send me your contact info in the chat, we can reach out to you as well. So next up, we have Renata. So Renata, I'm gonna unmute you now.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone.
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay,
Hi,
good.
Renata.
Thank you. Hi there. Yeah, I'm sort of a constant on these things now. So I have 3 questions, and I don't want to, they're 3 very different questions. So I can ask one, and then you can go to Roz if you'd like, and then I can come back. But I have 3 questions that I'd like answers on, please. So the first one is details of the bus terminal, to provide specific information about the bus terminal, because the drawings aren't very detailed right now. They have a lot of arrows going in and out and back and forth, but they're not very detailed about how off of the highways, and some are pretty obvious, but some are not. And it would be interesting to see how that is actually going to happen in that corridor where the bus terminal is going to be. So that's question number 1. When, or, do you have a detailed plan to show us, or when we might be able to see that in short course?
Thanks for your question, Renata. Are you asking about all of the bus terminals, or is there one in particular that you're interested in?
The main bus terminal that sits in between the main bus terminal. I mean, I mean, I'm getting nods. So, I mean, yes, so they know what I'm talking about.
Stephen, do you want to start us off?
Yeah,
A bridge station,
Yeah,
basically, is what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, understood, Renata. Just sort of for awareness, we've also got a small bus terminal at Clark Station, and quite a sort of an important bus terminal at Steele. So I think Ali was just trying to clarify, but definitely, as we're talking about the surface segment, the Bridge Station bus terminal is what you're interested in. And so, sort of as far as the layout goes, the bus terminal will be a single level bus terminal. So all of the platforms will be on a single level, and they will be effectively at the same elevation as Highway 7. The buses will circulate off of Highway 7 at both the sort of the connecting road that runs down to Yonge Street by the movie theater, and also Red Cedar, where both of those intersections will be in and out intersections for the bus terminal. The bus terminal will straddle the subway station below it, and so it will be essentially centered on the CN rail corridor, with sort of half the platforms on the east side, half the platforms on the west side. But again, they will be up at the same level as Highway 7, not down at the lower level where the subway and the heavy rail corridor will be. We will, over the coming sort of months, and as we continue to engage on sort of the design details as we move them forward, be starting to share sort of some of the station layout plans and sort of sharing those details. But really what that terminal will be is like a fully integrated intermodal hub that will not only sort of have the buses coming in and off of Yonge Street, but we'll also be able to connect those sort of passengers wanting to walk in from the south and connect in from the Langstaff Gateway community. There will be pedestrian circulation within the overall station, so that those folks either being dropped off at the station on the Langstaff Gateway side, or walking in from the Langstaff Gateway area can walk through the station in sort of nice comfort to get up to the bus terminal. What they will need to do is they will need to walk below the bridges down at essentially platform level. They'll reach the bus terminal at that lower level, where they'll then go up through what we refer to as the vertical circulation, which is a fancy name for elevators and escalators. They'll go up the elevators and escalators to the bus platform level, which again is at the sort of same elevation as the Highway 7, and jump on to the bus of their choice, which will be a combination of York Region Transit Services, which includes Viva, and the Go Bus services. I hope that helps to answer your question, Renata.
It does, and it'll be nice to see a detailed drawing or plan about that at some point, because that was a lot to take in. Just as a secondary question to that one, it was just recently announced that Go Transit is now in municipalities going to be allowing people coming from Go to hop on municipal transit for the same price. They don't have to pay anything. TTC was excluded in that, of course. So how does that affect? Does that affect Markham? So if people come up to that thing, they can take Markham Transit for free when it's built 30 years from now? I would presume Markham is not part of the TTC.
Yeah. So
anyway, you don't really need to answer that. That was just sort of a comment, but yeah.
It's a very complicated question, but I think what was announced will enable people who are taking York Region Transit, which is the sort of regional level transit provider, which also covers the city of Markham. So there isn't a separate city of Markham Transit. The service is provided by York Region that covers Markham. Yeah. And so those people will be able to take York Region Transit to Bridge Station, and provided sort of those fare policies remain in place, they will be able to sort of pay their one fare and take a combination of York Region Transit services, which includes Viva, or the Go services.
Well, I mean, just the thought about that is people from. Sorry?
No, I was just going to say, as you indicated, that TTC is not yet part of that sort of combined fare announcement that came out earlier this week.
Yeah, and that's a long ways away for this project. But okay, so that was my one question. I will continue on with the two of them. I'm in contact with Roz as well, and she said I should just go ahead instead of letting her in. So it was nice to hear about all the care for the natural environment, and the wildlife habitats and the water and the aquatic ecosystems and everything that's happening with so much mitigation and care. But it feels to us that we as people are not really cared about for our health and welfare. And so I would hope that you would support the people affected by the Yonge North Subway extension. And my question to you really is, what are you prepared to do for those people who are in need of help? I mean, Deb has, on many of these occasions with these meetings, spoken about mental health issues and, anxiety. And of course, anxiety begets physical issues sometimes. So what is Metrolinx prepared to do about that? Because it seems quite not, that you care more about fishes and birds than people, quite honestly. And also, put me back. Okay. Anyway.
Sorry, Renata, we can still hear you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The other part of the presentation was that there's restricting construction activities during sensitive timing windows for wildlife, so breeding periods and spawning periods. And I'm just wondering if a person along the Royal Orchard corridor, because of course that's where I live and that's what concerns me greatly, if there's a sensitive timing window in one of our homes, are you prepared to stop construction for that under our homes? So that's a two-part question of my second question.
Thanks very much, Renata.
Yeah, perhaps I'll start and look to my colleagues to also sort of offer in, especially sort of on the environmental sort of assessments and mitigations side. So I think we treat all elements of the natural and social environment equally in terms of trying to identify what we refer to as impacts and then the necessary mitigations for those impacts. And so, as we've talked about in the past, we have sort of assessed elements like noise and vibration below homes, and are mitigating noise and vibration below the Royal Orchard community to below the standard levels. And so that's a consistent approach with the way that we have looked at the natural environment as well, taking a look at, how can we sort of mitigate impacts by sort of adjustments in design or using technology. In some cases, the environment, sort of the mitigations are done by avoiding those sensitive times. And so, as our colleagues indicated, some of the construction activities that will interface directly with their habitat. So, if we need to go into a creek and actually move fish out of the creek so that we can do work in the creek, we would be respectful and do that work at a specific time. In the case of sort of tunneling directly below the creek, we don't have any sort of restrictions on the timing window because there are no direct impacts. And so I think, an answer to your question about, if there is a direct impact from the work that would be experienced by a homeowner or a resident or sort of some element of the broader environment, I would look to our sort of environmental team to sort of say, what is the nature of the impact and how could that impact be mitigated, either through avoidance or sort of adjustments in timing and these sorts of things. And so I think we have been pretty consistent in sort of our approach to evaluating the overall effects of the project and what we need to do to mitigate those effects. The other part of your question, and you indicated one of the residents has sort of brought up the mental health and sort of welfare aspects about the project. And I think, that's one that we continue to take back. I know there has been some communication directly with the resident about those sort of aspects of the work. We're, as sort of all of us should be, committed to sort of mental health and ensuring that we're supporting mental health. And so I think when we think about our project and sort of the scope of the project, there's no doubt that the sort of discussions that have been going on over the last sort of nearing 12 months on the alignment of the project have been stressful. They've been stressful for our residents. And I'm hopeful that we're sort of able to sort of understand what the impacts, the true impacts are, that we can capture those in our EPR addendum through the comments that we're sort of soliciting through this engagement, and that the team can evaluate those comments and make sure that we've actually captured it accurately in our EPR addendum, and that the mitigation measures and the adjustments that we need to make are there. So I think the sort of the binary question that you asked about, if there is a direct impact that the tunneling will have on a sort of a home above, would we stop the tunneling operation? I think that's a question that the team will take back to understand if there is a direct impact, and think about that as part of the EPR addendum. I hope that helps answer some of your question, Roz. I know it's a very complicated set of questions you have.
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to assess. I mean, I know that there's a high level of anxiety in the neighborhood, and walking our dog, anybody that you meet, this is all we talk about. It has been for a year. It has consumed our lives for a year, as you can well imagine. And I don't know, I will knock on wood, and if you all have wood there, I wish you'd do it the same, that I have not heard of any illnesses that have been caused by this, but I do know that it is a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety in the neighborhood of all the residents who have lived here. I mean, there are people here who are original homeowners, and the tunneling is going right underneath their homes, and they're shell shocked, and they're in their mid-70s, and it's hard for them to even accept this. It's hard for them to accept this, and for them to accept it. There was planning done for renovations. We did a huge renovation 3 years ago. We would not have done that had we known that this was happening. There are implications far reaching through this entire neighborhood without a lot of thought. And because you've never done this before, we can't really trust that the whole noise and vibration and you've said at one of the initial meetings that there will be a lot of noise coming underneath the house during the time when it will be tunneled. So the people affected are hurting because of this, because, you know, we put a lot of stock in where we live. And this actually leads me to my next question. So I understand that Nick, part of the engagement team, and Azim have been here. Azim has not walked the Royal Orchard, proposed route yet. I understand that Nick has, and actually saw some properties that were, so that he could have an idea about this. My question is not if, but when, considering that that next week is the engagement overview. When between now and next, I think it's Thursday is our meeting, is it not? Might you all who are on this call right now come and do a walk with us through the neighborhood from where it hits under the gazebo right through until where it might exit our neighborhood. And I would request again, not if, but when you would all come to see this, because you can't do this in a vacuum. You can't talk to us in a vacuum without having seen the properties. I know, Stephen, you came up and you were at the gazebo, I believe, at one point for a meeting, but when I think you had a beard at that time as well. So anyway, could be wrong, but yeah. So and I didn't meet you there, but my husband did. But I would ask that you would do that you would take the time and you would do that, and you would let us know, because Azim apparently has been in the neighborhood, but he's never let us know that he's here. At least I've never been aware of it. So perhaps somebody else was, but I would appreciate that. And especially with the EA being, as what's it called? Identifying potential environmental effects of proposed project, dealing with surface. Today's was surface segment. And I would hazard a guess that, the people living here are surface, we're part of that surface. And so I would appreciate it if you would all come and we could look you in the eye and we could talk to you and you could see, especially if next week's meeting is about the concerns that we have been raising. So if you could let us know when that might happen.
Sure, I can just simply say that absolutely, we'll come and do a walkabout with you, of course. We'll connect with you and figure out what time and date works for you, and we'll come out. We'd be happy to. The team is out regularly doing different things, dropping notices, holding pop-up information sessions, sharing flyers and postcards about tonight's event. They were there last week and the week before as well, but noted that you'd like a time and date and connect with you directly, and of course, we'll do that. We'll commit to that.
And Renata, I'll just add,
Leona.
I'm sorry we've never been able to meet, but yeah, we, like Leona said, we're out there quite a bit. So I'd happy to connect with you and do that walkabout along with our colleagues.
Great, that's wonderful, because there'll be more than just me. So that'll be be good, especially considering what next week's meeting's about.
Thanks very much, Renata.
Thank you.
Got a number of hands up and a few questions from the chat. So I'm going to go to Roz next, and then we've got Fahim, and then we have a couple chat questions, and then Joe, I see that your hand is up, and we'll get to you after those chat questions. So Roz, I'm going to unmute you now.
Okay, hi. I have a three-part question regarding Metrolinx transit corridor lands. If I could ask them one at a time to deal with this topic, it would be really appreciated. And I don't want to take up a lot of time away from other people who are waiting to ask questions. So if you could just answer them specifically, and that would be great. So we've been told that the alignment will be within designated corridor control lands that include a 30-meter buffer zone on either side of the tunnels, and that any homes within the area will require a Metrolinx corridor development permit to have certain work done, mainly construction or alteration of buildings, which we know. But my specific questions are regarding the diagrams shared in the EA, specifically the mapping diagrams for segment 2, figures 16 through 20, which affect our Royal Orchard area and the Holy Cross Cemetery. So the figures show a study area that is 30 meters wide. Can you confirm whether this is also an accurate representation of the transit corridor 30-meter lands? I don't believe it is because, and this is my reasoning, the study area in the diagrams is on either side of the green lines. From our last Engage meeting, you did confirm with me based on my measurements that the green lines represent the middle of the tunnels. On your website, the corridor control land meter buffer zones begin from the outside of the tunnels, not from the center of the tunnels. Therefore, can I conclude that the transit corridor lands will be wider than what's represented by the study area shown in your diagrams? And in fact, more homes are affected than one would think on looking at these diagrams, that the transit corridor lands will be at least another 3.5 meters wider on either side of these diagram study areas. And that's my first question.
Okay, thank you, Roz. I think, Mark, you can take this one.
Yeah, and Roz, I think we don't want to get into sort of speculation because when we get to designating the corridor lands, we will publish very precise maps. So it would be it would just be kind of a speculative conversation for us to have this discussion now. What I could say though is we have designated corridor lands on, for instance, the Scarborough subway project. If you haven't already, sounds like you do spend a bit of time researching this stuff. You could take a look at those maps just to get a feel for how we mapped it. But when we do get to the mapping process, and I know because we did this again for Scarborough, we have another one of these sessions, and we go through, we provide the detailed mapping, notifications go out to homeowners, and then we have a review with people who are interested to have the discussion. So I know that's not a satisfying answer for you, but that's probably the best we can do at this point in time, other than to commit that we will have a bespoke dedicated session for it, and there will be absolute clarity as to the designation and where the lines are drawn.
Well, I in everything that I see on Metrolinx corridor lands, they say that it's 30 meters. So if you know what your alignment is, you should know what your corridor lands are. And I find it just deceiving for the public when we're looking at the environmental assessment mapping diagrams, that the full impact of the width of the tunnels is not shown. Those two green lines showing the center of the tunnels does not accurately show the width underneath somebody's house and the full impact. So my second question now then is on figure 20 and 21, where the mapping shows the areas of the alignment as it travels under the CN corridor through the Holy Cross Cemetery. Knowing that the green lines show the center of the tunnels, this means that half of the east tunnel travels directly under the CN rail, and the west tunnel should be right up to the edge of the CN corridor land and possibly under the cemetery land, as Sam has previously alluded. Do you have will Holy Cross Cemetery also have to get permits for burials? And how will the transit corridor land affect the cemetery? Will you be removing trees on the cemetery property? We know that transit corridor lands are affecting our homes. How does the transit corridor land affect the cemetery?
So I think I'd just like to take the opportunity there to clarify the context of the letter that Sam was referencing. So I think it's really important to read the first paragraph of the letter, and that was specifically talking about alternate alignments that were being proposed to go under the cemetery. So the Holy Cross folks were, in essence, writing into the council to let them know that they weren't supportive of alignments that went underneath the cemetery, which were alternate proposals being tabled by other community groups. So as Steve mentioned, the final alignment does not go under the cemetery. If you look carefully at the mapping or walk in the area, quick comment back to Renata. I've walked around. I didn't wear a Metrolinx jacket, but next time I'm up, I will. That area beside the tracks, there's a service road, and then there's a row of trees. And we're underground at that point in time. If you look carefully at that mapping, we would be both under the road and then perhaps a little bit under the treed area. But again, underground and not disturbing the surface at that section.
Yeah, that's what so the transit corridor land, that was the question, whether that would be affecting the cemetery. Would they have to get permits for anything?
Yeah, so let's talk about the permits. And I think, the process is intended to be seamless for residents who have this designation on their property. A circulation, if you were getting work done to your house that triggered one of these permits, the municipality would circulate that to us. We'd review it within a specified timeline and send it back to you. So it should be seamless and transparent, and unless you were planning something like a significant subsurface excavation over top of one of our tunnels, it shouldn't be an issue at all.
Okay, my final question, I'm not really getting clear answer on that one, but my final question is for existing homes in the transit corridor land where the tunnel, we know based on the alignment, travels directly under houses and properties. Will the tunneling affect those homes that have existing pools in their backyards right now where the tunnel goes under the pools? And will the tunneling cause any removal of mature private or city trees that are over the tunnels?
Yeah, so I'll start with the tree question. The tunnels are depth of 20 meters to the bottom of the tunnel. Obviously 5.6 meters reduced from that to the top. That won't affect trees over top of the tunnel. And for the pools, we've answered this kind of question in a roundabout way. So to be a bit more direct, we do a precondition survey of the house and the property before we commence with our tunneling. That precondition survey is intended to identify what the existing condition is. It's generally photography, and it creates a record that you have and we have to establish the existing condition of the property. We also have information about what type of building structure it is. Is it wood construction? Is it steel framed? Is it a concrete reinforced tower? Those are all information and data points that go into the work we do to estimate and understand what type of settlement or impact tunneling would have. We do not tolerate settlements beyond specified ranges. That's not a very clear statement, but the plain language way of saying it is we don't want to break anything. So we require our tunnelers to predictively model what type of settlement will occur. And then if settlement is happening beyond the requirements or the allowable limits, they need to mitigate what's going to happen. So they can actually adjust the operation of the machine. They can inject ground stabilizing solutions in through the front of the machine to prevent or reduce the amount of settlement that's happening, all with that explicit intention of ensuring that there's no damage to the surface or to structures on the surface. If the modeling, and this happens way before the tunneling starts, if the modeling shows that there's going to be something happening that we don't want to happen, i.e. damage to a structure or to something like a gas main, then we require our tunnelers and our contractors to get out before the tunneling will even come by that area to work to secure the structure or the piece of infrastructure like a gas main, maybe relocate that gas main, but work to ensure that the tunneling does not create damage. So we're very careful about that, and we're absolutely laser focused on ensuring that there isn't damage to structures and other critical pieces of infrastructure in the neighborhood where we're tunneling. Long answer, but I needed to get most of that out for you.
Thanks very much,
I'm
Mark.
unmuted. I was muted there for a while, so
Okay.
it was a long answer, but I don't quite didn't hear whether somebody with a pool right now and the tunnel is going under the pool, if you're gonna make that person get rid of their pool, or is their pool safe because it's already existing?
I can't imagine us coming and telling you to get rid of your pool. That would be wild. So
thank you.
So all of that answer was to say, was simply to say we're extremely careful. We need to understand all of what's happening in the area so that can feed into the work that we're doing, and we can protect everything as we tunnel by.
Thanks very much, Mark. We do have a number of questions in the chat, and just with an eye on the time, we are getting close to 8:30. So I just want to ask, if you can, please keep your questions brief if possible, and limit to one question, just so that we can get as many in these last moments of tonight's virtual open house. So the next question from the chat is, has Metrolinx received approval from CN to share the corridor? If it hasn't been received, is CN Rail obligated to provide approval, and what happens if CN refuses to provide said approval? So I'm going to send this one over to Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Ali, and thanks for the question. This is one that we've answered several times before, and sort of the quick version is we are working quite closely with CN, actively negotiating what we refer to as an access agreement. Both parties are working to a June 2022 deadline for having the access agreement in place, and that is sort of matched up with the timelines that we need for sort of our procurements of the tunnel contract. So there are no red flags that we have on our negotiations and discussions with CN. They are proceeding quite well, and we are, as two teams, working towards the June 2022 timeline. And so I think sort of it's also important to say that, you know, Yonge North and sort of the subway coming into what's referred to as the CN Bala subdivision is not the only interface that Metrolinx has with CN. We share track across the entire network. Freight corridors are shared with transit corridors in many locations across the GTA on the Metrolinx Go network. And so not only are we sort of working quite closely and quite well with CN on Yonge North, but we're also working quite closely and quite well with them on the other projects.
Thanks very much, Stephen. We do have a follow-up to that question that came in the chat. So while we're on the topic, is there a legal obligation that CN provide approval is the question.
So I would say in principle, like CN is not compelled to provide Metrolinx approval to do that, nor do we sort of believe that CN needs to be compelled to provide Metrolinx approval to do that. As I mentioned, we have quite a good working relationship with CN. Discussions have been sort of ongoing and sort of are actively proceeding, with the timeline sort of being June of this year to reach conclusion and execution of an access agreement. So what I'll say is we are continuing and have no concerns about reaching the conclusion with CN in time for our tunnel request for proposal release later this summer.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Next, we're going to go to an audio question. So next up is Fahim. Fahim, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hello, hi. So I have two questions. So my first question is, has it been considered to take the subway rather than going underground, to have it go elevated instead? Because it is my understanding that if the subway were to be elevated, it would cut down substantially on costs, and there would be it wouldn't really need to tunnel under homes and stuff like that, right? And they would be able to build more stations and possibly extend it further. And my second question is, with the underground plan that is currently existing, once it goes to the CN corridor, will that portion of the subway be owned by Metrolinx, or will it be owned by, or will the land still be owned by CN?
Thanks very much, Fahim. Mark and Stephen, do you want to start us off with this one?
With emphasis on the first part, by the way, the elevation.
Thanks.
Yeah, so thanks for the questions, Bahim. So I'll start off on the first part is we are connecting subway service to the existing Line 1 subway at Finch Station, and it needs to operate as a continuous line. So when you talk about the option of the subway coming from below ground to being at grade further south than where we are already planning on doing that, I assume you mean sort of, from Finch Station, immediately bring it to the surface and run it on the surface from there. We did not look at that option. That option really sort of is detrimental to the urban context and the character of the communities that Toronto, York, and the municipalities have spent a long time planning. Sort of running a subway like that up to the middle of Yonge Street in an area where they're looking to intensify and sort of really create that good public realm is inconsistent with sort of having a subway service in there. And so that's why, because we have to continue the subway technology, because again, it's a continuation of the Line 1, so it's not as though we're going to transition to a different technology like an LRT. So those subway vehicles need to be traveling. And so we are continuing it below ground until sort of we reach the appropriate point to bring it up to surface, where we have many benefits of being at surface, including sort of the ability to further extend it at grade along the CN corridor. What we are doing is sort of building that subway consistent with the approach that is taken on the subway south of Finch. As far as ownership of the land, I'm assuming it's an ownership of land as opposed to ownership of the assets that are going to be built, like the tunnels and the track. Metrolinx, as the province of Ontario, will 100% own the assets that are built. So we will have care and control of all of the assets that are built, and they will remain in provincial ownership. The land that the sort of subway will occupy within the CN corridor, that is part of the active negotiations with CN as to the type of sort of access agreement that we will have. And it could take many forms, including sort of permanent, sort of what we refer to as fee simple ownership, meaning we own the land, or a lease type arrangement. So sort of those are part of the active negotiations that are taking place right now. But sort of the objective is to ensure that Metrolinx retains ownership of the assets, and that Metrolinx has access to the land for owning, operating, maintaining, and eventually renewing and replacing the assets within the territory that is currently owned by CN. I hope that helps answer the question.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We're going to go to a question in the chat now, which was asking for clarification, or was a clarification on the question that we answered off the top from the Engage page. So the question and comment is, I would like to know when we will receive notification that they will be using the property under our house, not when the tunneling will occur. Oh, sorry, follow up as well, but not under the house, but the city property in front of it. Also the question on the emergency exit buildings, would like clarification on whether land has been acquired for these buildings. So on the question on the tunneling, Mark, I think I'll go to you first, and then Mark and Maria, maybe you can discuss about the question on the EEBs.
Yeah, so why don't I start with the EEBs, and then I'll take it over to Maria for the property acquisition timing. So on the EEBs, no, we've not acquired any property for the EEBs at this point in time. So Maria, did you want to cover off the timing for property acquisitions in the area?
Sure. And thank you for the question. So at this stage, all the landowners that are within the Royal Orchard community that will be having a tunnel under either their home or under their property have been notified of that. If we are talking specifically about the land in the right-of-way. We work very closely with the municipal partners on acquiring the rights to the lands that we will need for the tunnels. This work is ongoing, and we continue to have those conversations with the municipalities today. I'm hoping that it clarifies that question. If it's related to when you will be notified that the land has been acquired from the municipal partners, we would not typically notify adjacent landowners of acquisitions of land for other landowners. So normally we would not notify you, but if it's in relationship to when the work would be happening in the right-of-way, again, that would be a construction staging question, and those kinds of notifications do go out, and I think Mark had answered that previously.
Thanks very much, Maria. Just a note on the time, we are past 8:30, but we are going to continue for 15 more minutes. So I'm going to go to the next chat question that we received, which is, would tunnel boring only be would tunnel boring only be during the day when tunneling under homes in the Royal Orchard neighborhood, or are the TBMs operating 24 hours per day? So Mark, maybe you can answer the question on the tunneling and the TBMs.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So tunneling happens 24 hours a day. So the machines are designed to start and then continue their progress forward, really only stopping for major planned maintenance, and those are done in specific areas of the alignment. So the plan is, and this is typical of all sort of mechanized tunneling projects using machines of this nature, which are the only kind of machines that we can use in this region, would be to have that tunneling work go 24/7. So the machine, I think I noted earlier, advances at about 10 to 15 meters a day. So if you're on a 50-foot lot, the machine will pass within a day and a bit. And then, just a reminder, there are 2 machines for this project. So the second machine would pass at a time shortly thereafter. And I think we have noted on previous occasions, previous meetings, when the machine comes by and is doing the tunneling, there is noticeable and potentially discernible. So you could notice some of the vibration. That is from the tunneling process only, not speaking to the ongoing operations of the subway service once it's fully installed and in service. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Mark. We're going to go to a hand up now. So Joe, you're our next question, and I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi guys, can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Amazing. So I just had just a general question here. I'm actually on the TTC website, and I took a look at what the 4 most busy stations are for the TTC, and they happen to be Bloor, Yonge, St. George, and St. George. And all of those stations are accessible by the Bloor Danforth line. So I guess my question here is, rather than going and adding more stops to the Yonge University subway line, which is already really congested, why wouldn't you just increase the service on the existing GO train line that goes north-south, and use the infrastructure that's already there, because it's basically taking you to the same place anyways. I mean, you could theoretically just put a station at where the GO train intersects Bloor, and just connect with the TTC there and give everyone the opportunity to ride that without having to do any drilling, any kind of tunneling, any new tunnels, any new stations, anything. And basically use the infrastructure that we've already paid for with our tax dollars, rather than have to spend another $5 billion for something that'll take 20 years when we can actually have this in place in all of a year if we wanted to.
Thanks very much for your question, Joe. Stephen, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Thanks, Ali, and thanks, Joe, for the question. So I think what you're pointing to is the need not only for transit service, but a lot more transit service. If you take a look at the various transportation plans that have been developed, whether it's the Metrolinx Regional Transportation Plan, the City of Toronto Transportation Plan, York Region's Transportation Plan, the plans of Markham, Vaughan, and Richmond Hill. They've all identified adding transit service as being critical to accommodating the residential and employment growth that we are going to see, and to help sort of manage travel demand for our existing communities. What that means is lots of services needed, including the Yonge North Subway extension and potentially future increases on the Richmond Hill line. So when we take the baseline is the planning work has established the need for the Yonge North Subway extension project. That's where it became a priority of the provincial government and is being advanced as part of the priority subway program. When we think about the role of the Yonge Subway extension and the role of the Richmond Hill corridor, it's important to recognize that the Richmond Hill corridor is obviously a connection that goes down into the City of Toronto, but it is challenged by the fact it runs for the most part through the Don Valley corridor, like the Don Valley sort of river area. And so what that means is increasing service on that line is incredibly challenging because there are significant constraints through there before service can be ramped up. And so I think what you're getting at is we've identified the need for the Yonge Subway extension. Metrolinx is planning to do a study for the Richmond Hill line and what the future of that Richmond Hill line is, and that will be sort of an initial business case that our planning colleagues will be doing, and that will really explore what is the role of the Richmond Hill GO line and the need to increase service on it, because the limitation on the number of stations that it can have south of Oriel, which is the station at the 401, is really constrained by the fact it does go through those valley lands. And so getting back to your answer about why not the Richmond Hill line versus Yonge Subway, I think, the answer is, in the fullness of time with the population and employment growth of the GTA, both are needed. The question is how much service on each is needed.
Thanks, Stephen. But maybe just further to that, in the fullness of time, we already know that the Yonge North Subway line, as it is today, is already congested and will become increasingly congested as you go and extend that service. And the problem with the subway and all of these things is that it's the peak hours where it just becomes incredibly busy, and the rest of the time where there's nothing. So when we look at the subway going forward, I still don't think that it makes sense to go and add more and more trains and subway stations to that corridor when it's just going to get super slammed and be terrible. And that's the reason why most people take the GO train, because it's the better alternative than taking the subway. So I'm not sure I quite see your point, but I guess we'll have to review the statements and the documents.
Yeah, well, maybe just one thing when you're sort of doing your research. There's a few things to also consider. There are a number of projects underway that are designed to increase the capacity of Line 1, meaning sort of you can process or move more people through the corridor, and essentially what that means is you put more trains on. There are some enabling projects that are needed for that so that the TTC can reduce the headways or the distance between trains, and they're underway on what they refer to as their Line 1 capacity enhancement program right now. One of those is the Bloor-Yonge station improvements and really relieving the congestion and some of the challenges that station has with its current design. That's a project that the TTC is leading. It's been sort of funded by all three levels of government because they see the priority of that congestion relief and crowding relief, and that's making its way through. The other project to keep an eye on is the Ontario line. It used to be called the Relief Line, and the Relief Line was a direct relation to the fact that it will provide relief for crowding on Line 1. And so the provincial government has taken responsibility for the former Relief Line, now the Ontario line, and are really advancing that project quickly. And to your point about YNSE challenging sort of downstream crowding, the commitment that the provincial government has made in sort of their work with the City of Toronto is that Yonge North will not go into service prior to the Ontario line, because it is seen as the Ontario line provides that crowding relief. So take your point about the importance of making sure that the relief is available to Line 1 prior to putting additional demand from the YNSE extension.
Thanks very much, Stephen. We've got 2 more hands up in the Zoom room. So Nama, I'm going to unmute you now so that you can ask your question. Nama, go ahead.
Muted, no? Oh, now I'm not. Okay, you just unmuted me. Hi, guys. I just want to acknowledge that I did receive an answer from you guys, and thank you.
Yep.
Mark took the time to answer my question from the last meeting. However, it put a smile on my face because it was a great answer, and it stated, based on our current analysis, there are no vents or grades required in the project area east of Yonge through Royal Orchard to the tunnel portal just south of Langstaff. Further investigation will confirm the ventilation infrastructure required for the full route, and we will continue to keep the community updated as we move through the next phases of design. So it made me smile because it says to me, no vents or grades in our east of Yonge. Amazing. However, it says based on our current analysis, and then it says further investigations. So I just hope that you're not shushing us with these answers, with making me smile, and that it's going to turn into a frown. Because based on future, and based on more, and based on this, oh, oopsie, we do need grades and vents. And my second comment, before you, I mean, it's a comment, I don't know if it's even a question. I mean, Mark, you can reply to it. My second is that I really hope you guys will come and do the route, because when I invited you guys, okay, and Stephen, I specifically invited you, only Nick showed up, which was actually, didn't feel good that you guys didn't take me and whoever was there seriously. So forget it, was a long time ago. A lot of water has gone down through the creek since then. So I really hope that this time you guys will come and will see the topography of the neighborhood. And because I made sure to take Nick to 3 typical homes and see exactly the kind of structures and that are going to be affected by noise, by vibration, and so on and so forth. And I, just to summarize what you guys just said, I really hope that it's safe to tunnel under schools when kids are in class. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the comment, Nama.
I'll be very brief, Nama. I'm glad I made you smile. Just the little bit of wiggle room is, you know, being fully transparent that, you know, we have to do more detailed analysis. And so, you know, if in the outside chance that there was a requirement for ventilation infrastructure, the other part of the answer there is that it's not going to ever take the form of a grate in a sidewalk or a roadway. I was talking about emergency exit buildings earlier. If we needed something, we would integrate it into that structure, and then we would also put some sort of acoustic baffling on it, so as to ensure that there's no noise emitted from that structure. So that seemed like maybe a little bit of additional superfluous detail for you in the written answer, but I wanted to provide that to you now. But we're feeling pretty confident at this moment that we don't need anything of either nature in the neighborhood there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. We are almost at 10 to 9 here, so that does conclude the Q&A portion of the evening. Thanks again, everybody, so much for participating. I'm sorry if we weren't able to get to your question. We will answer all of the questions on the Engage site. So if you weren't able to ask your question, please feel free to post it there or to email us at our project contact info, which is also on the event site. So thank you again for participating. And I will put the email in the chat as well in case you want to just grab it from there. So Azim, back over to you.
Thanks, Ali, and thank you to all the presenters and the panelists, and all of you, of course, for the evening and asking some really thoughtful questions. So, as we said at the outset, your feedback is always appreciated and welcome. If you haven't already, please do sign up for the Yonge North Subway Extension newsletter, so you can stay informed about the project and be notified about all the public events. And you can do so on our website at metrolinx.com/Yonge Subway EXT. So with that, thank you again for this evening, and we'll hope to see you next Thursday, March 10th, and have a good and safe evening. Thank you.